office.
Hang on. It's not even.
That just doesn't make a good visual with that cart there.
Why don't we do it back in front of the
end?
end?
I mean, because that's like center
Then the camera
stage.
can't see it.
I can turn the camera. I've used it.
As long as I'm doing it.
It might be better up by the end in front. Because you all aren't covering it. I thought you'd be blocking it.
Well, he can zoom in, can't he, with that?
This is what you're focusing on.
Oh, but I mean with that, if you guys go.
Yeah, he can zoom in. Yeah, Can you, is Steve here?
I'm asking him.
All right, Chrissy, you're up.
Yeah,
Zoom in.
this is nice with the end in the middle.
Brandon, you
Otherwise,
wanna
you
move
just
out?
saw
Yep.
your cart full of stuff.
Whitney, you can come up here if you want.
Are we ready? You guys let me know when we're ready.
Hang on, give Whitney a second. You can stand with me.
Are we ready? All right, board member oath of office, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Norwood City School District, Hamilton County, Ohio, to the best of your ability, in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Dedication, I'm right there. All right, Julie, we may need to move up a little bit closer to the microphones. Move this way just a little bit more. Mrs. Bauer, you want to come up? I think we need to be up this way a little closer to the microphones. Oh. I'm not sure they could hear you. Okay. Raise your right hand. You say, "I do," if you agree with this statement. Board member oath of office. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Norwood City School District, Hamilton County, Ohio, to the best of your ability in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? I do. Thank you for your service. Sign in here. I would finally next. Raise your right hand. Board member oath of office. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Norwood City School District, Hamilton County, Ohio, to the best of your ability in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do.
Thank you. Sir, for your service. Got some good pictures. Now that everyone has been sworn in, Ms. Cantros, would you call the roll again? Mr. Atwood?
Present.
Ms. Ballard? Present. Mrs. Cole? Present. Mrs. Rosa?
Present.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
On to 3.0, election of the president. The Board of Education is to elect the president. The president pro tem will continue to preside over the meeting at this time. Any member of the Board of Education may nominate someone for office. It should be noted that nominations do not require a second. If more than one person is nominated for each position, the treasurer shall publicly call the roll of the board and ask members to vote their choice. The Ohio law requires a majority vote of all members of the board to elect an officer.
I'll nominate Mr. Atwood.
Any other nominations?
I'll nominate Amber Ballard.
Any other nominations? All right,
I move to close nominations.
When I call your name, you're going to state the first name of the person that you wish to have as president. You are allowed to vote for yourself, as this is an unpaid position. Mr. Atwood.
Mr. Atwood.
Ms. Ballard.
Ms. Ballard?
Mrs. Cole.
Mr. Atwood?
Mrs. Rarica.
Ms. Ballard.
Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Atwood.
Thank you, Mr. President Atwood. Can I read your oath of office to you again, please? Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as President of the Board of Education of the Norwood City School District, Hamilton County, Ohio, to the best of your ability, in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
I do.
Nervous?
All right, it states here in the agenda that at this point on, the newly elected president will continue on with the meeting. So with that, we'll move on to item number 4 in our agenda, which is the election of the vice president. The Board of Education is to elect a vice president. Any member of the Board of Education may nominate someone for office. It should be noted that nominations do not require a second. If more than one person is nominated for each position, the treasurer shall publicly call the roll of the board and ask members to vote their choice. The Ohio law requires the majority vote of all members of the board to elect an officer. I'd like to open up nominations for the position of vice president.
I nominate Amber Ballard.
Are there any other nominations?
I nominate Debbie Cole.
Are there any other nominations? I move to close nominations. Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Mr. Atwood?
Mrs. Cole?
Ms. Ballard?
Ms. Ballard?
Mrs. Cole?
Mrs. Cole?
Mrs. Rarica?
Ms. Ballard.
Mr. Taylor?
Mrs. Cole.
Mrs. Cole, will you join me up front for your ceremonial oath? Please raise your right hand. Board member oath of office. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of the Norwood City School District, Hamilton County, Ohio, to the best of your ability in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? Thank you.
All right, moving on in our agenda, item number 5 is committee appointment and chairpersons. The Board of President now has the option to appoint members for the standing committees and any ad hoc committees that may be necessary. We do have 4 standing committees that this board serves on. I did this last year, so as president, I will not chair any single committee myself. I will join other committees as required, but I'm not going to lead any of them, as I do think the work is important for all the board members. With that being said, for the Finance Committee, I am nominating Mr. Taylor. For the Education Committee, I am nominating Ms. Ballard. For the Building and Grounds Committee, I am nominating Mrs. Rarica. And for the Policy Committee, I am nominating Mrs. Cole. I'd like to make a motion that the board approves these committee appointments.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on these appointments?
Are you selecting co-chairs for those at this time?
I will do co-chairs, but I'm not appointing those at this time. We can appoint those later. Any other discussion? Mrs. Campos, please call the roll.
Mr. Atwood?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Sure, yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
With the board approval, the committee chairs have been set. Moving on to item number 6 in our agenda is to establish time, date, and location of future school board meetings. So we have a list in the agenda of the meeting dates, and these are all tentative and can be changed as these meeting dates become closer. Would like to ask for a motion to approve these meeting dates.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yes. We are looking at starting in 2 weeks on the 27th for the ease of NCT, moving our meetings back over to the high school into the auditorium. It's a little easier for our guests to find us. It's a lot easier for NCT to transport equipment and set up. So moving forward, they wanted to keep those in there. Other than that, the dates and times are the same.
So the reason why we were here in the first place is because of construction in the high school. How is that progressing?
They said that it wouldn't be an issue when I spoke to Steve earlier. And they like the idea of having it just be downstairs.
The only issue I could see would be during the summer, because at that time, the air conditioning, we may not have air conditioning, and there will be construction during the summer months.
Okay.
That would make that an issue at the high school.
But during the school year, are there any objections to having it at the middle school auditorium?
Not high school auditorium.
Or the high school mini auditorium is what I meant to say.
We also talked about potentially using Sharpsburg with the newly renovated auditorium there. They also have equipment, so that can also serve if we didn't want to come up here. During the summer months, that's a backup option as well, since it's right there at the board office location.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is that we've done this in the past, change meeting locations as the meetings become closer, so that can all be addressed as we get closer to summer, figuring out where we want to be. I'm in favor of using the mini auditorium in the high school as opposed to this space. I mean, I'm appreciative that we have had this space available to us. I understand why we came here because of the work that was being done over there. But if that space is available to us and, construction isn't going to impede us, or we're not going to impede that progress with our work there, I would like to move back to the high school mini auditorium.
Are we able to bring our rising student families back in if we go back over there?
That was discussed because of being able to social distance. We got parking right out front. It's a lot easier for guests to find us again. And they wouldn't have to worry about the key card access and someone going up and down 3 flights.
Yep.
So it would be a lot easier for us to start incorporating those norms again once we're able to.
Great.
And for now, we were talking about spacing on stage. Used to, we were kind of crammed pretty close together. We can take the podium and move it just down and spread out the tables fairly easily across the stage, so that won't be an issue. And we'll be able to welcome back our students.
I would still like to keep the picture of the students up on the screen, so in
Yeah.
case a family doesn't come,
Yes.
plus everyone gets to see it. So that way they'll actually get to be in person
Mm-hmm.
and have it on the screen. Okay.
And it's nice in there with the ability to turn the lights down, we'll be able to see projection items a little easier.
All right, so it looks like we're going to begin moving our meetings back to the high school mini auditorium. It would be great if we can invite our Rising Star students. I'd love to see them and their families.
We will start doing that.
Yeah. All right. Did I make a motion?
We have a motion and a second.
And a second? Okay. I would like to amend my motion to include the changed venue. So whoever seconded that, do you accept the amendment?
I think I motioned and Amber second. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
So I will motion to amend the location.
Second, my second.
Second, your second. I think those are all great ideas. Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Mr. Atwood?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Verica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
That approved. Moving on to item number 7 in the organizational meeting, the Board Service Fund and Proper Public Purpose Appropriation. To align with policy BHD, the board sets appropriation for the Board Service Fund not to exceed $20,000 for the calendar year 2022 from the general fund. And to align with policy BHD, the board sets appropriations for the proper public purpose not to exceed $20,000 for the calendar year. I'd like to motion that we accept the appropriation for the board service fund and the proper public purpose.
Second.
Any discussion on this? This is something that we do every year, so if we, go to a conference or, have some sort of an event for the board, that's where that money would come from, is for this. Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Mr. Atwood?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Verica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
All right, item number 8 in our agenda is to set the bond for the president, superintendent, and treasurer. The handling of funds and signing fiscal certificates and requirements and various degrees of the board president, superintendent, and treasurer. The signing of fiscal certificate states that sufficient funds are available to operate a school district. Statute recommends that the president, superintendent, and treasurer have a bond and/or employee dishonesty coverage covering them for any liability, and this amount shall be established for at least $20,000. Currently, the treasurer has $200,000 bond. Superintendent and board president are covered by OSBA employee dishonesty coverage of $25,000 each, and that coincides with each position's term of office. Can I have a motion that we set the bond?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Mr. Atwood?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Verica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
With that approved, we'll move on to item number 9, authorization of the treasurer. So, actually, we'll combine a bunch of things. So, 9.01 is a resolution allowing the treasurer to request advance taxes from the county. 9.02 is the approval of the 22-23 annual modified tax budget. 9.03 is the approval of the OSBA annual membership, those dues. 9.04 is to authorize the treasurer to set appropriations before board authorization. 9.05 is to authorize the treasurer to advance or transfer cash fund to fund before board authorization. 9.06 is to authorize the treasurer to invest and activate interim funds. 9.08 is to authorize the treasurer to pay bills following Norwood's purchasing requirements. 9.08 is to waive requirements to calculate a capital improvement reserve. And 9.09 is to accept the recommendations of the Norwood's Records Commission to shred old documents. May I ask for a motion to approve items 9.01 through 9.09?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion on any of those items? Mrs. Camp House, please call the roll.
Mr. Otway?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Item number 10 on our agenda is the authorization of the superintendent. 10.01 is the appointment of employees. So the superintendent shall appoint all employees and report such actions to the Board of Education at the next regular board meeting. So this is giving us, the superintendent, the authority to hire. I'd like to make a motion that we allow this authorization.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Camp House, please call the roll.
Mr. Otway?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Item number 11 in our agenda is the appointment of board representatives. So there are a number of other boards that we do interact with. There are 5 listed, and we've always included an additional one.
I was going to say, this was missing from the list.
Yep, so we will be including Avenues for Success. So I'm going to nominate for the Great Oaks Board, Ms. Ballard. For the Norwood Community Television Board, Mrs. Cole. For the OSBA Legislative Liaison, myself. And then the Treasurer to the Tax Incentive Review Council, Mrs. Camp House. The Public Records Liaison, Mrs. Heather Cole. And then for Avenues for Success, Mrs. Rarica. May I have a motion to approve these board representatives?
I'll motion.
Can I have a second? Any discussion?
Yes, the OSBA Legislative Liaison position, I'm already serving at OSBA at the state with the direct legislative liaisons that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great to work with you on that committee together so that we can piece items from both sides, whatever you get, and then what I bring back from the quarterly meetings.
That's fine, I have no issues with that. Okay. Any other discussion? Mrs. Camp House, please call the roll.
Mr. Otway?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Finally, item number 12 is adjournment of the organizational meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Camp House, please call the roll.
Mr. Otway?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 6:12. All right, I would like to welcome everybody to the Norwood City School District Committee meeting for Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. Mrs. Camp House, please call the roll.
Mr. Otway?
Present.
Ms. Ballard?
Present.
Mrs. Cole?
Present.
Mrs. Rarica?
Present.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
We've already done the pledge, so item number 2 is the adoption of the agenda. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt tonight's agenda as written.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Camp House, please call the roll.
Mr. Otway?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
All right, item number 3 is discussion items, and it looks like we have Sharpsburg Elementary and Primary Principal, Mr. Westendorf, here to share some things with us.
Good evening, and one, thank you Superintendent Herndon and board members for having me. Also a shout out on, I believe it's Board Appreciation Month. Although every month probably feels like that when you're dealing with all the things going on in our world these days. So I wanted to give an update on kind of the things going on at Sharpsburg, but I want to do a little different this time. Instead of, of course, the wonderful things we got going on, I wanted to kind of open your eye to some of the data and the things that we use. Initially, some people hear school data, not the most yourself, we love data. We're data junkies. It drives our instruction, and as you'll see at the end, it doesn't turn our kids into numbers, it turns it into a science. And there's certainly a piece to that as well. So I'd be crazy if I didn't talk about our newest recognition, and that's from the U.S. News and World Report. Previously, they had they did rankings on colleges, universities, and high schools. This year, they did it on elementary schools. I initially was skeptical, so I looked at it and said, what's a way they can find the data and things like that? It shouldn't have been so negative. What I did find out is they were ranking their scores. They're ranking their scores based on student growth, which is something we can control. We can't control the students we give, but we can control what we do to grow them, and that's for every student across all ability levels. So as you see, you have the top 16% ranking of Ohio schools. Our reading and math proficiency ranks are in the top third of the state, and our reading and math performance factors, which is again based on the growth that is expected of a student versus the growth that actually achieved. And mind you, this is during our instruction ranking. So something that's even I'm more proud of is my staff taking the steps to adapt to, of course, a changing educational environment, but making it great, regardless of the challenges. So definitely a point of pride for me. So to get those kind of recognitions, and obviously for any school, to continue to grow your students and grow yourself as an educator, what are we using data for in terms of driving our instruction? Of course, we're looking for trends in the data to plan our whole class lessons, and our use of MAP as an assessment that we give. MAP's one of those assessments that collects data just about, we use it from second through, I believe, high school. And to me, it's the most valuable data we get. If we didn't have state testing or mandates, I would be using this in my school as frequent as we do now. Again, you can use that data to look at how we can form small groups to meet kids at their level, and how we can grow them individually. Of course, we're always collecting data on a regular basis, and data at any grade level is a way to share and discuss growth with your students, whether that's a first grader making a bar graph of growth, or high schoolers you're talking to them about detailed skill areas that they need to improve on. So when we look at MAP, again, MAP is an assessment given to all students from second grade on up, specific content areas. And this teacher, fourth grade teacher, wonderful fourth grade teacher, this is the data she might get that's fairly general. Here's our students that are above the 50th percentile. Okay, great, that's nice. But what we like to dive into is individual data. So obviously this is a student who's their name on their family, and intentionally. And this is a chance to look at a kid as an individual. One, this is accessible for parents, but two, we look at this as teachers, we meet as teams, we meet with our TBT coaches, which is teacher-based teams, and those are coaches from the county. And we look at one individual student and how they fare. So this student, we're looking at, so they achieve very high, but we see low growth. So this student is someone who, they're already a high achiever, and a lot of times those are harder kids to grow. So what is our intentional instruction to grow that high student? So things we can kind of look at. This student, their one area of focus is their vocabulary and acquisition of data. I kind of laugh to myself because when I was teaching, that was always my weakest point as a teacher, so it's just coming back on. And then an area of strength, literary text, key ideas and details. So to me, you're not just looking at weaknesses, you're looking at strengths to grow those as well. So this student, this would be their growth marked over a period of time. You can see winter 21. Typically all winters, it seems like, I could be wrong, have a dip. But this is a student's growth over the last 2.5 years. What else I like, but I also try to be cautious with it as an educator with my staff, is they sometimes have predictors on them. And while data is great and I can have it at the end, I don't like the fact that sometimes data will predict, this child will score this, or this child will get this on the ACT based on their score in fourth grade. Well, as educators, that's not how we work. How can it be better? What are the challenges along the way that we can help them overcome? So we try to get careful with that, but we do like seeing growth. Another resource, of course, is from the state, from ODE. This would be our fall scores. So I'm looking at my third grade English language learners, which with the third grade guarantee, we got to be careful about and very, very purposeful with our work so students meet that benchmark. Thankfully, this is getting better to read the data year after year after year. And what you'll see that has helped us, if I'm an individual teacher, I can look at it and in the green it says 5 items in which students perform the best. It literally tells me which question is up there, numbers 1, 3, 5, 8, 11. Obviously, I can't see the question because it's a state test, but I can refer back to that. They'll tell me this question was vocabulary, this question was writing, this question was this. As teachers nowadays, it's a great way to collect data. Well, it's already collected for you. And then to me, 5 items on which students perform the worst. So in general, let's see, like 60 kids, they didn't do well in these questions and they cover this content. That's certainly going to be a focus for me. So this would be an individual student. And they actually scored quite well with this first area, reading informational text, that they're near proficient. So this is probably their area where I want to focus on with them the most. And again, I can look at questions that they got correct. Can't look at the question itself, but again, the type of question it is. This is an area they did well. Same idea. And then writing is always a tricky one. Student, they say they're above proficient, wonderful, but they scored 4 points out of a 10-point question. So they must have hit some key points, but they clearly missed some other things. So that's something I want to look at. Whether I create an assessment myself or use something that's already helpful. Other data sources we use, Google Forms. I think of the same third grade teacher. She creates her tests on Google Form. She formats them to look like what they'll see on the state test. And again, the state test isn't driving her, the standards are. If you're driven by the standards, you'll get there. And then, a lot of things that automatically grades it for in the forms, she's done the work ahead of time. Edulastic and Nearpod are great resources we have that many teachers use. I even have this is my favorite one. This is like old school Excel file. Teacher uses this on an assessment they created themselves. Once they mark 1s and 0s for correct and wrong, it breaks it down by the standards because they did the work ahead of time. And now they can look at their own teaching and obviously individual students. So what I will say, what data does for a student and school's growth, it makes sure students don't fall through the cracks. We're measuring our effectiveness. Is this curriculum that we're using or this intervention that I'm doing with the student working as well as it could? It's a way to use resources. We have these needs here in this grade or this room. Can I put in extra aid there or an intervention specialist or a title teacher somewhere? Promotes accountability for me as a teacher. When I see that data, good or bad, it's telling me all I need to know. If you're hard on yourself like I am, I see the low data, it drives me all of my own. It does allow for student, teacher, and family discussions about their growth, shows trends, not necessarily solutions. We still have that piece to go. And it certainly creates, enhances, and drives interventions. So every 6 to 8 weeks, we're looking at what we're doing with individual kids. Are they getting what they need? If they're growing, do we keep that? If they're not growing, what are we doing different? In fact, we'll get those on Thursday. What data does not do, as much as I love it, it's never replacing a personal connection or rapport with students. While data is the science of teaching, the art of teaching is what teachers do and what staff does with their class, with their students. Again, it doesn't turn a student to just a number. It makes, data does not make your lesson engaging and exciting. That's what wonderful individual teachers do. It won't measure your soft skills and your personal skills, interpersonal skills. And it's certainly, like I said before, it's not going to define a student's path. But again, it gives us the drive to grow them. And when you really feel like you've hit the peak with data is when you get students talking about their own numbers. Not that you want a third grader obsessed with their math scores, but you want a third grader to know. So just a shout out to my staff. These are the things I've seen in the last 6 years. It's been great just supporting that and making sure. Ms. Chessman, she's the gear behind it. So thank you. Any questions? Questions? Lots of fun data questions, I'm sure.
Any questions from Mr. Wessendorf?
But congratulations on that great award. That's impressive. And we have a sign outside the school. Two signs.
All right, we'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the Education Committee. Looks like we have 2 field trips coming up. One is the MVFCA Social Justice Student Summit with Mr. Pitzer, and then the NHS Silhouettes have a field trip with Mr. Robinson.
And they are both coming up before the 27th meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any issues with those field trips?
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah, it is a tongue twister. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to item number 5, Personnel, Superintendent Ronan.
Yes, we have 2 individuals, Brian Pitzer and John Cole, who are getting a supplemental contract to supervise the weight room for strength training. So that's all I have tonight.
All right. Item number 6, Building and Grounds Committee. I know these are last year's appointments, but Mrs. Cole?
Okay, so our first one, we have the Norwood Civil Service. They're requesting the high school cafeteria for the police officer civil service exam, February 23rd from 5:45 to 8:15 p.m. We also have Pope Athletics. They're requesting our softball field for youth baseball games, Saturdays, May 7th through June 18th, and Wednesdays, June 15th and 22nd from 12 to 6. And finally, Norwood Knothole, as always, requesting Shea Stadium for opening day, April 9th from 10 to 12:30.
All right, does anybody have any questions about any of those facility requests? We'll move on to item number 7 on our agenda, the Finance Committee. Mrs. Camphouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. The CFO report, all monthly financial reports and change order listings are attached for your review. 7.02, appropriation resolution, our budget for the year. 7.03, SHP amendment to their agreement. When we made the decision to not complete renovations at all the elementaries at the same time, we knew it would extend our renovation project timeline. This agreement extends our architecture review period another year to complete the high school and Williams Avenue renovations. SHP is only charging us half of what they should be charging us, so that was nice of them. And 7.04, Centerpoint elevator extensions. The Centerpoint elevator project at the high school is seeing some construction delays due to supply chain issues. First, the actual elevator was delayed. Now the elevator doors are going to be delayed. Our substantial completion date will now be March 11th of '22. However, these change orders, they affect the date only. They do not increase our costs. So it's just a delay.
All
And
right,
that's all I have for finance.
thank you. Does anybody have any questions about any of the finance items?
I do have a question. It's not necessarily finance, but it is related to the elevator. Since we are going back over to that area for our meetings, will that elevator be accessible to us to get our guests in from that side door without them having to go all the way around the building to use the elevator to get to the second floor?
Yes.
After the March meeting, I assume, if they stay on target?
Yes, for evening meetings, although somebody will have to use their fob to allow them access.
I just want to make sure, because that would be a really good thing to announce when we get back down there, that guests will no longer have to go all the way around the building to get to the second floor if they need that access.
All right. Any other questions? No? And then finally, last item on the agenda is adjournment. May I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Mr. Atwood?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Verica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
And we are adjourned.